Hi everyone, a little video just to share one of these little silly stupid mini revelations which has made a big difference to my approach to work. There are so many of these little common sense things that you think you know, but then like as soon as you actually really consider them and really apply them, it actually starts making a big difference. So what I'm going to talk about in this video is recycling knowledge from help requests. So what I mean is, like, a lot of the time when putting out products and resources and stuff, you get the same kinds of questions pop up again and again. In a way, I kind of think about it like, sometimes I think about it like, you know, how CAD designers, like they're designing certain products or like the body of an airplane or a piece of architecture, for example, and they simulate the stress points. I feel like a lot of products, even related to software, like with Blender, have these stress points, and a lot of them are things like, you know, the installation process or certain parts of the user interface and things like that. So they tend to be the points where people have the most help requests. Now the thing is, responding to help requests takes up a lot of time, but I think there are effective ways to subvert it, and what I'm learning from like the Modular Workspaces product. And of course it's common sense, right? But good documentation really helps, but it's a bit more than that, because it's not just having good documentation. If you have a really hyper-specific help request, I think something that's really good to do is take the specific information from that and then add it to the documentation, even if it doesn't completely fit in like the kind of cohesive narrative of the documentation page. Just add a little note that says, oh, some people have had problems with this, here is a solution. And of course, the hope of that is that when people come along with the same help requests again in the future, they'll read that part in the documentation and go, oh yeah, that's the solution. But of course, that's not usually the case because people don't read documentation. Okay, people do read documentation, but like there's always going to be someone that doesn't read it. Like there have been so many situations where I've had people like email me for the simplest things that they can discover in like 10 seconds through a Google search. And in a couple of situations, they've come back in the future and been like, oh, is there any update for like this request I sent? I'm like, dude, you waited like 2 days to send me a request again. You could have figured it out yourself in 10 seconds anyway. I think that recycling data and information and knowledge is like really important in trying to keep this kind of useful web of information available to all your kind of customers and product users. So that's something I want to strive towards more in the future, actually recycling and adding this information to the documentation. Like, and to prove that process and to prove that commitment, I've been working on building up the Notion project wiki again. So for a little bit of history there, I used to use Notion for doing my documentation, and this was not a time when I was actually using Notion to kind of organize my regular projects. Then I moved it over to my website because I thought that was where I was spending more time. But then as I started using Notion again to do more of my project organization, I figured, hey, actually no, it's easier on there. And it's easier to kind of write the posts, and you could just copy paste in images onto the wiki pages. I can also edit it from my phone really easily, so it just seems more sensible that Notion will be the place to keep the project documentation. So over time things are going to move on to there, and I want to do things which are more than just the software project related things. I want to add more information that might be useful to like other YouTube creators as well. Things to keep in mind, kind of maybe some psychological things as well, since we do a lot of that in these discussion videos, but I think we'll have to wait and see for that. Also, it'll be nice to kind of do kind of more article and text-based versions of tutorials that I'm recording onto videos, because I feel like that'll be helpful for people as well. Maybe even people with accessibility problems that don't enjoy kind of watching the videos. If they can access some of that information on a wiki-based system, I think that'll be good. But of course, that takes a lot of time investment. If you've ever written documentation in the past, you'll know that. It's quite time-consuming and boring, and it takes a lot of focus, especially for someone with a low attention span. But ultimately, while I'm doing work and while I'm responding to help requests, this might sound silly, I have Factorio in my mind. So this is a bit of a running joke, I suppose, because whenever I like talk about optimizing projects and organization, there's always a phrase which I throw out to friends, which is the factory must grow. And that's a term from the Factorio game. Well, it's kind of like a meme in the community at this point, which basically means that no matter what happens, you must continue to grow the factory. But I think it represents more than that. I think it represents automation as a whole. And automation is supposed to, I guess, simplify the process of making things and speed up, well, the manufacturing process, but I suppose also workflow. And I consider documentation as like a form of automation. And what I mean by that is it takes in people that are having problems and then it spits out people that are no longer having problems. Whereas before I was doing the manual labor of responding to them, I want to treat the documentation like a factory process, if that makes sense. Not to say that customers are like a form of product or something, but you know what I mean. It's like it's an assist. Ultimately, the ideal situation is to have no help requests come in. And I see some like other creators in the community sometimes, well, it's quite rare, but I have seen that sometimes they'll put things like a little notice in their product descriptions that say no customer support is included with this purchase, or something along those lines, basically saying they don't have the time time to respond to help requests, which I totally get, and I can't judge them for that because I don't respond to every help request. But I do think it's a little bit bad taste, just a bit. But I can't criticize too much, as I said, like I don't have the time to respond to everyone, and there are a lot of requests which people really should be able to figure out by themselves. But obviously it's always worth keeping in mind that people come from very, very, very different backgrounds and have very different amounts of experience with the software or just software in general. So you've always got to remind yourself not to get like too frustrated with a help request because you never know like who it's coming from. I mean, there have been a couple of situations where I've gotten really frustrated responding to a help request where like you're telling people to do something, like as many clearly explained steps as possible with pictures and everything, like please drag this here and do this, and they can't get it. They don't, like, no matter how hard you try, how many times you explain, they just can't get their head around it. Like even if you show them a video showing, look, I have shown you right here in this video, here's another video as just a backup in case that wasn't clear enough, drag this over here, and like they just can't do it. And sometimes you just like you scratch your hair out because it's just like I'm literally showing you exactly what to do. I don't know, like we try our best, right? We try our best. In one situation, someone was having such a difficult time following my instructions that they did want to get it working, but they also asked for a refund if they couldn't get it working. So I emailed the store representatives and I said, look, I've tried. Here's evidence of me trying as best as I can. Can you please just give this person a refund? But I suppose it's the nature of being like in this kind of experimental zone with the technology where we're always trying new things and building new tools. Of course, there are going to be some teething issues, especially because when you're developing new tools, you're kind of working from a certain biased direction. There are certain techniques that you like to work with. So when you're building like, interface elements, you're going to be focusing the properties of those around that bias of your kind of interest in the direction. Obviously, your biases are unique to you and your experience that you've had with the technology so far, so sometimes it's going to be a bit difficult for certain people to understand why you've done certain design elements. And that still kind of translates to things like code and artwork as well, but if I think specifically about code, it reminds me of our creativity over efficiency video, where we talked about how I don't write things in efficient ways, which is sometimes confusing to other programmers. Because I work in ways which are easy for me to enter again when I come back around in the future, but it's not traditional, like it's not traditionally laid out. And, I've had some emails from people complaining because I'm not writing like Python code in a widely acknowledged conventional way and stuff like that. So I do think it's good for people like us to have like a documentation space or something along those lines, which kind of guides people into that full process so they can kind of understand things better without us needing to explain ourselves to absolutely everyone that has a query about it. But like I said, it's a continual process and I'm still learning and still kind of trying to find new ways to keep myself focused when writing documentation so I can actually be more effective in getting some of that done. But probably be a good idea to make that a point of delegation again to try and get other people helping with that. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I'll end my fast-paced rambling here. Leave a dog emoji in the comments so I can see who made it this far. Let me know if there's anything you would like to see on like a kind of documentation wiki for my projects. Like, are there any particular types of information, possibly tutorial related or product related, that you think should be on there that might be useful for people? Even if like you're trying to get into YouTube or making products yourself, anything doesn't have to be technical that you think would be useful for you to know, useful for you to study, to help you to maybe get products in front of people or kind of optimize your creation process for making videos, or like anything kind of related around those fields. Because if I know what people might like, then I can make content for that. Anyway, yeah, have a fantastic day. I'll see you soon.